episode 282 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn how to win singles matches with Jonathan Stokke. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the show. Always happy to have you listening. And today's episode is with Coach Jonathan Stokke. If you may remember, I had Jonathan on episodes 240 and 241. It was a really great and insightful two-parter, so definitely check that out if you want to learn more about how to win and formulate singles and doubles strategy. But today, Jonathan and I dive pretty deep into how to win more singles matches. We talk about things like how different grips factor into your strategy, how to hide weaknesses, how to beat several different types of player profiles, and much more. So I think you'll really enjoy this one. And if you haven't heard of Jonathan, first off, listen to those other episodes I mentioned, but Jonathan hosts the Baseline Intelligence podcast, which is a great show that I listen to. He spent 14 years as both a student athlete and coach with the Duke men's national tennis program, college tennis program. He's a former All-American and two-time All-ACC pick, and he was also named the ITA Carolina Region Assistant Coach of the Year. He has instructed many, many highly ranked junior players at the Smith Stearns Tennis Academy in South Carolina. And he helped Duke to 2 ACC Championship titles and was named the ACC Tournament MVP in 2006. Jonathan also played in 4 consecutive NCAA Championship tournaments, advancing to the round of 16 3 times, posting a 93-59 overall singles record and a 113-47 doubles mark as well. So yeah, a lot of great success with Jonathan in his career, and now he's a fantastic coach, and he posts a lot of great content on Instagram, among other platforms. So with that, I really hope that you enjoy our conversation about singles strategy. If you're a singles player or if you're a doubles player and you want to get better with formulating singles strategy, then this is the episode for you. So without further ado, here's my interview with Coach Jonathan Stokke. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. And it's really a pleasure to bring back Jonathan Stokke on the podcast. We spoke, a few months ago, episode like 241, we actually did a two-parter. We were chatting before I hit the record button and really had a great time with you, Jonathan. And I'm just happy to have you back. You're a great coach, and I'm looking forward to talking about single strategy with you today. So how have you been?
I've been great, man. Just got off the court, and there's nowhere I'd rather be on a Tuesday night than talking tennis with you.
Oh, wow. It's a big honor, man. I'm sure there's some other more fun things you could be doing, but I really do appreciate your time and expertise. So yeah, I guess we'll just launch right into it. I mean, I've always played, singles all my life, and it's a, huge part of juniors. I probably played, probably like one competitive doubles match, when I was a kid, and it was all singles. So I'm a singles player at heart. So I guess to start off, like when a player, say like an amateur club level player, our audience here is probably mostly like 3.0 to 4.5 with some 5.0 plus players. When we want to formulate single strategy, what's like the first step that players should take to start thinking about or formulating that strategy?
I think the first step, and definitely it's harder than it sounds, but you have to figure out what you can actually do. So what am I capable of doing? There's a ton of tactics out there. There's a serve and volleyer, there's a counter puncher, but you have to be very honest with yourself and as detailed as possible. So you can't just say, hey, I know I have a good forehand. It's, do I have a good inside out forehand? Do I have a good running forehand? Do I have a good serve +1 forehand? It's not just, do I have a good serve? It's, what is my serve? Is it because it's so consistent? Is it my location? Is it the speed? And so once you have a really good idea what you're capable of doing, you can start kind of formulating and looking at all the different tactics that you can use that accentuate your strengths and then minimize the weaknesses. But I'm always stunned when I see a player for the first time, or honestly, even players that I've coached for a while, and I just throw in the, hey, what do you do well? Like, why do you win? And how few people can answer that question with the detail necessary to like really generate the tactic that's best for them.
Yeah, great stuff, John. So when let's say like a player, they have a good cross-court forehand, but they don't have a good inside-out. So then, like, what's the next step in the process? Like, we avoid hitting inside-out forehands, or is it only if it's more, really comfortable for us to hit it, or how do you approach that once we identify these things?
Right. So you have the strength of the cross-court forehand and maybe the weakness for you of I'm not very consistent with my inside-out. So actually, I'll give you an example for me. When I was a player, I loved the ball low with topspin to my forehand side. So anything waist high, I could crack it. But if someone sliced it to me or hit a high heavy, I really didn't enjoy that. So for me, it was just an automatic. If you slice or hit high to me, I just rolled it back in play. And obviously in practice, I'm going to try to develop that so that I don't have that hole in my game. But I think just the most simple thing to do is when you get that inside out forehand, of course you have to hit it sometimes. But if you know that's not a strength of yours and you're not great at it, then just try a simpler shot. Hit a little bit slower than you think you should. Give yourself a couple more feet in from the sideline, add a little spin. And in the match, that's the best you can do. And then you go back to the practice court with your coach or whoever it may be, and you go, hey, I got to get that inside out up to the level of my cross court forehand. Because there's, you're going to have to hit all the shots. You can't just hit an entire match of cross court forehands. If you're playing an opponent with any sort of brain, they're going to figure that out. But in the moment, I would just try a simpler shot, realize it's a weakness or at least not a strength for you, and kind of go from there.
So when I have like partners or even myself, like when we face like, let's say big kick serves or even the scenarios that you mentioned where you face an uncomfortable ball up high or down low, I guess there's usually like a couple choices presented. Generally, it's like you back up and you let the ball drop, or you move forward and then try to get it in your strike zone. So like, is there one, particular one that you lean towards, or like how do you kind of determine like whether to do that? Because sometimes that's confusing as well.
You're saying taking a kick serve early versus like hanging back and kind of hitting a heavy ball?
Yeah, or even like with your shots too, like, like a high forehand, like maybe you back off, or do you like try to meet it, lower or something like that? So yeah, same question.
So almost every answer here is going to be, it depends, right? So it depends on the serve coming to me. So if that person has a really good second serve that's fast and they can move it all over the box, they can serve T and they can serve wide, I'm probably going to hang back, because if I take it early, I've got to react, I've got to switch my grip. And I better hit that return well, or else now I'm in the middle of the court and I'm on defense. That's not where I want to be. If they have a slower serve, I am for sure going to step up and take that early, give it a rip, and look for a second ball to attack, or maybe even follow that in. So again, you take account, what am I good at already? And then you go, what kind of serve am I going against? Maybe you're not someone who likes to take it early, but if their second serve is so slow, that might be the best tactic for that particular match. So a lot of it depends on the serve and kind of what you're feeling on that particular day.
So there's kind of a selfish question, Jonathan, but I think it applies to like a decent amount of players as well. So like my forehand grip is like somewhere between like a semi-Western and a Western. And sometimes I have trouble with players, let's say right-handers, like on the deuce side, and they can hit like pretty good slice serves. So a lot of times I find myself like wanting to do like the buggy whip, like the Nadal forehand type of thing. But it's really, it's tough when it's like low like that. Like, do you have any advice on that? I mean, do we just want to chip that, or like, I don't know, shorten the swing? Like, how do you counter that? That's like really good slice serve.
Right. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with chipping. A return in play for me is always an A. And then if you return it with any depth, fine, it's an A+. But if you can chip it in, that's not the end of the world. What I would say is I would always adjust with my positioning. So if me getting stretched wide and low is tough, you better believe before you serve, I'm going to be one step over to my right and maybe one step up. And I'm going to go, hey, serve me T if you want. Most people can't spot it within 6 inches of the line anyway. So I'm going to try to eliminate as many of those opportunities as possible. But the pre-return positioning is huge. I used to feel like based on where you stand, you're like the puppet master, right? You're just telling the opponent where I want you to serve. I'm going to stand over here, and now you have to serve T against me. It's a great feeling when you kind of start telling them what they're going to do. So yeah, take a step over, move through it a little more. But at the end of the day, if you have to start chipping, I did that in college at line 1 at Duke University. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, obviously, as we've talked about, great career that you've had and continue to have with coaching now. I used to do like the opposite thing in terms of like making the opponent like serve where I wanted to, where I would love it if they had like a really good like kick serve to the backhand, let's say, or a decent one, I guess I would say, like on the deuce side, I would actually like stand, a step or two to the left and like bait them to hit to my forehand. So it's kind of the opposite approach. And I had my partner, do that a few times, and that worked pretty well. So I think it's pretty important, and you change the look as well. And then sometimes it gets into their head, and they start missing things like that. So that's very good.
Yeah, no question. I was talking to another coach today on the court, and we were saying, like, obviously the if someone was serving great against you, the worst thing you could tell them is go like, "Hey, what are you doing so well today? Like, what are you thinking about?" But another way to do that without actually saying it is just with your positioning, right? So like just by positioning, I'm already making them use their conscious mind and go, "Why is he standing there? What does he want me? Oh, he thinks I'm serving well over here." I'm accomplishing the same thing just with my body position before the return, instead of having to be that jerk who goes over and tries to say something like, "Man, you're playing great today," or whatever it may be. I'm accomplishing the same thing just with my positioning.
Yeah, I like that, the parallel there. Yeah, because definitely, I forgot where I read that as you were discussing with the coach, that like sometimes if somebody's like on fire with like their forehand or their serve, then you tell them like, "Wow, you're not missing your forehand at all," and then like all of a sudden they start missing. It's just it's classic. So it's
once they engage their conscious mind, it's over. It's done.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I don't. Yeah, like you mentioned, like I don't really like doing that, but some people do it.
I'm not advocating for it, but with your return positioning, I guarantee you get them thinking with just where you're standing, and that's a great thing for you as a returner.
Yeah, that is the classy way to do it, just with the positioning instead of saying it. I like it.
There you go.
Yeah. So I guess, trying to keep things flowy, like let's talk about like return strategy in singles now. What's your general thought process in terms of like, where to hit the return? I mean, you can cover like speed, spin, like depth, like angle, things like that. Like how do you go about deciding, how to execute that?
So on a first serve return, whether it's my lowest ranked, lowest level player I work with or the highest ranked, it's deep middle. And our whole goal is, can we get that return in play as often as possible? I think 80, depending on the level, but around 85% or better is awesome. If you go deep middle, you eliminate the angles from your opponent on that first ball, so you don't have to run as much. And if you actually do get the deep part of that, there's a chance you can get a short ball. So first serve is so simple. It's just always deep middle over and over and over again. And your whole job is to make that server hold with no free points. A lot of times when someone holds against you, you've given them at least one return, if not two, and they only have to win 2 other points the hard way. I want that person winning 4 over and over and over again. The second serve, I'm a big believer in this, and most of the coaches on my podcast have talked about this as well. If it's attackable, you attack it. And so you could just sit back and roll every second serve return in, but depending on the quality of that serve, you might want to take it up. And if you're still only making 80, 85%, but you're ripping them deep middle, or even maybe slightly off center, now you might be winning, 55, 60% of those second serve return points. So one of them is more neutralizing. The first serve return, you're more neutralizing. Second serve, you're in attack mode. And then in the match, you just have to weigh, is the risk worth the reward? Am I making enough big second serve returns to justify going after it? Because if you're missing too much, now you're back in that problem of giving them free points. So that's where you have to kind of use your own head and evaluate the match as it goes on.
Yeah, when you attack that second serve, I mean, and you're successful too, like you put a lot of pressure on the server, and then when they have another second serve, sometimes they try to go bigger and they miss and things like that. It kind of makes me think about the World Cup. I don't know how much you've been watching, Jonathan, but a lot of wild games. But, some like when the opponent has the ball, on the defense, and then you have like the offensive players like press them, run towards them. Like sometimes it like yields some errors on occasion. So it's kind of the same, concept to some degree, I guess. But so in terms of the first serve, I mean, the first serve is so tough. When I play league matches, especially like indoors, like I'm facing some big servers, and it's hard to be consistent with it. So what tips do you have to try to get to that like 80 to 85%, deep down the middle return percentage back, when you're facing tough servers, especially?
So the first thing I would say is if I go against a big server, I need to find out what their favorite serves are. And most good servers can serve to all 4 locations, or if you're including body, all 6 locations, but they have a favorite. So when was the last match you played, actually?
Last match I played was, Saturday morning. Yeah.
Okay, so Saturday morning, did you go out and on your first serve point, did you try your worst serve?
No.
Exactly. So when I'm playing a good server, like the first point they serve in the deuce court, whether it's wide or tee, I'm already going, okay, well, most people probably don't want to start a match off with their least favorite serve. So I'm already, my antenna's going off, deuce and ad court. And then the first break point right away, I'm going, okay, it's deuce, 4-4 deuce. And he served me tee. Okay, that's probably a very good indicator. So I'm going to make that guy serve with his second best serve on big points and as much as often or as much as possible, right? So that is how I'm going to figure out what he likes to do. If it's a great serve, you probably want to take a step back, give yourself more time. You see all the pro players doing it. That's not a problem. And if you get the return and play more because you have more time to react, excellent. And then maybe one technical thing, and I see this quite a bit, is once I see that it's a forehand or a backhand return, get that racket back right away as quickly as you can. And you can do hand toss drills. You can do little reflex exercises. I see some people, maybe they're just thinking too much and it's a little slow take back. Once you know where it is, as fast as you can, get yourself set, and then you have a good chance to make contact out in front and be a little more consistent.
Got it. Yeah, that's great advice, obviously. And when you talk about getting the racket back as soon as possible, like, I mean, I guess are you still like emphasizing like the unit turn type of turn, or do you just, does it matter as much? Like, just get the racket back, like with the arm, like how do you?
It's a unit turn, but it's also a much shorter swing, right? Like you're not, taking some huge windup on someone's first serve, but you also don't want to just literally stick your arm out either way. So it's just a much shorter motion. But again, that's where if you take that step back, you might actually have time where you feel like you can take a slightly bigger cut at it and not get laid or not make yourself inconsistent.
Yeah, certainly, we're not all Medvedev with the amazing timing. And I forget, how he does his take back on returns. Like, it's probably still huge. But, I videoed myself, which is, big proponent. We both are of videoing yourself. And, like, I saw myself returning, and I was, like, taking these, like, big swings, on my forehand especially. And so, yeah, that's one thing for sure, to make it easier on yourself, just have that shorter unit turn take back. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also important, like I said, if you know what you're trying to do. So on the first serve return, if you go, my goal is to be consistent and hit it down the middle. So I don't hear a lot of offensive talk there. So how does a big swing help me accomplish that goal? And you go, okay, well, it doesn't even make sense what I'm trying to do there. So lining up the technique with the tactic for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. Love that. And so in terms of like different grips, like when you're playing opponents, like how do you, what's your thought process there? Because I mean, obviously, you can take advantage of certain opponents depending on their grip.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I don't know about you, but that was something I wasn't as aware of when I was playing. Obviously, as a coach, I don't have to watch the ball, so I can look at the opponent and go, oh, man, they've got this extreme grip. But I just used to look for things that gave them trouble. So you said you're close to a Western, you're a semi-Western. So, when he's stretched out wide and when it's low, he struggles. Yeah. That's something I would have picked up on. I don't know that at the time when I was 14 years old, I would have said, he's got a Western grip. But I would have noticed what you struggle with, or someone with an extreme Eastern forehand grip. Oh, man, they hate the ball up high. Okay, like I kind of figured that one out too. So I think it can be a little challenging for the recreational player to be looking at those types of things and deciding what the grip is. But I think the height of the ball is a pretty good indicator of what type of grip you have. If you struggle with low balls, it's probably closer to that extreme Western, and you're struggling with the high balls, it's probably more that extreme Eastern. But, I've seen a little bit of everything, but just paying attention to what they like and don't like is probably the key.
Yeah, and you talk about like strategy as a junior. I felt like I was completely brainless. Like I didn't really think about any strategy. Maybe like the tip top of the iceberg was like, oh, this person has a bad backhand, let me hit there. But otherwise, it was just like, at least for me, especially like as a consistent baseliner, just getting the ball back pretty much, and then finding the forehand. So I just really wish I had that acumen when I was younger. But it's like most players.
I was just going to say, from what I see on a daily basis, you are not alone in that you play without your brain. People can do a much better job with that.
Yeah. But, if I had a coach like yourself, I'm sure I would have been thinking about that a lot more. So,
of course, there you go.
Maybe next lifetime, we'll see. But good stuff. So, one thing as well, I'm curious about, like when I interviewed, some pros, I remember a few of them saying like, well, I don't really pay attention so much to my opponent. I just try to take care of like, so when they're formulating the strategy, they're like, I just try to think about my game and just go from there. So like, what do you think's more important, like focusing on your own strengths and weaknesses or the opponents? Like, should one take precedence over the other? I mean, certainly, you want to think about both, I would think, but like, is one more important than the other?
Again, I think it depends. So if I was playing, I have no idea what I'm rated right now, but if I was playing a 4-0 singles player, I would assume I'm in a great position to crush them, right? And
Yes.
So I don't think I have to spend a ton of time wondering what they do or don't do well. I go, if I do my things well, I can't lose, right? If I'm playing someone my level, I probably have to do both, right? So I got to know what I'm doing well, but also go, how does that match up? Oh, he doesn't like his wide backhand, or he hates coming to the net, or he doesn't like this serve. I definitely have to be aware of both. And then if I'm playing someone better than me, significantly better, my whole goal is to bring them down to my level. So now most of my focus is on them. How do I make them have the worst day of their life? Not how do I get myself to have the best day of my life? And so based on that level of opponent, my focus kind of shifts more. It's kind of like a sliding scale, more on me versus them. But the better the player, the more I'm trying to bring them down to my level. And if I'm playing someone I'm much better than, I am just probably focused on myself.
Well, what's a match that you remember, or I guess to rephrase, like, how can you give us an example of like a match that you played where you were able to make the opponent have like the worst day of his life? I forget how you put it exactly, but like torture him in terms of like strategy. Like, is there one match that comes to mind for you?
I mean, it falls naturally in line with what I do well, but I was a serve and volleyer, and I was my kind of philosophy was 3 balls or less. I want to finish you in 3 balls or less. And so there's a lot of ground strokers out there who crave a rhythm. And I would go, cool, you like a rhythm? Not going to get one today, buddy. Like, I am going to slap balls. I am going to slice balls. I'm going to charge the net. It's going to feel like a different sport. Honestly, like I said, because that was kind of my style, there are a lot of college guys who would out loud say, this is not tennis. And that's when I knew I had it. I was like, yeah, it sure is. And by the way, you're losing at it, buddy. Like, so that was something I always did, was short, quick points. We're playing my style, not yours. I'm comfortable with the style. You're not. You want the rhythm. You don't get to hit 2 balls the same way in a row. And people hated that. It just came down, honestly, to winning or losing that match would always come down to kind of the serve return. But that was something I always did. And like I said, it was something I enjoyed anyway. But there were a lot of players in college tennis who absolutely hated playing me.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's pretty hilarious, like when you said how, whoever it was said that like serve and volley is not tennis. Because I got this opposite comment, but, more commonly where, I was like hitting moon balls to somebody who hated it, and they said that's not tennis. So you got the totally opposite approach of serve and volley, and somehow that's not tennis.
People like to say it's not tennis when they're losing.
Yes, exactly. Ego trip, I guess. And that reminds me, one of the the top player actually during maybe like the 16s and 14s, probably other age groups to be honest, was Joey Addis. I forget if we talked about him, but he went to Duke as well, and he was a serve and volley. I remember playing him indoors and just, I'm a bassliner. He gave me 0 rhythm. I lost like 1 and 2 or something like that. It was rough. So
we made All-American together, and my senior year at Duke, we were doubles partners, and that was part of the deal, right? We both had good serves. We're both taking cuts, and we wanted people in doubles to just feel like they were reacting the whole match. They're reacting to us. We are telling them what's going to happen. And hopefully our shots were good enough to get it done, and which most of the time they were. But yeah, he was a great player, and that was kind of our doubles philosophy.
Sick. Yeah, I forgot that you guys play together. That is so cool. Really nice guy as well. So I guess, obviously a lot of us have, weaknesses. Like, so let's take the example of like, maybe to make it more concrete, like a 4-5 player who has like a weak backhand. So very common. So how would you advise this player to be able to like minimize or hide their weakness if possible, like, yeah, as much as they can so that they can utilize their other strengths?
When you say a weak backhand, do you mean inconsistent or do you mean just like there's nothing on the ball?
Yeah, that is, see, yeah, you got to go to the particulars. So I guess in this particular example, inconsistent. So, once the person hits like, two in a row, like it's getting dicey, they might miss a third one.
Right. So again, going back to kind of like my forehand example, let's say my forehand's not a great shot. Okay. I'm going to hit that at a speed that I know I can make it at. Right. And that might be much slower than my ego wants to allow. But I go, anyone out there can really make a backhand, even if their backhand's weak, if you hit it slow enough. The fear is, oh, but they'll crush it. So what else do people hate on the ball that comes to them? Most of them don't like a ball out of their strike zone. So I go, man, if I just hit high, slow cross court on the ball that I hate, at least I've made it. The odds of this 4-5 player coming up and smacking that for a winner for 2 sets is essentially zero. They can do it sometimes, but I know they're not going to like that. So number one is just take pace off, add height, and check your ego. Like, you don't have to rip every ball out there. I promise you, people will not take that ball. It doesn't happen in college. It didn't happen at high level in college. Make the ball with some height and you're in good shape. The only other thing with that backhand example in particular is most people like to hit cross court. So if I really want to get you to hit to my forehand, I'll probably feel that ball high, slow down the line and see if I can get you to hit your forehand cross court back to me. But sometimes, based on the strength of their serve or their return, they might have the upper hand and they might pound your backhand a couple times. And my whole goal was, I want you to hit a winner on me. Right? Like, I don't want to just give you that point. So if you're going to my weakness and I roll one in and you hit a winner, I don't know. How many great shots do you think you hit in a match? You personally?
Oh, you mean like a volume of like winners, you mean?
Yeah,
like great winners.
Just you walk off the court at the end of 2 sets and you go, man, I think I probably hit like 40 great shots. Like, what do you think your number is?
No, maybe like on average, I don't know, like 2.
I mean, you probably hit more than that, but my whole thinking was, let's say I just roll my backhand in high cross court. And let's say you actually did step up and you hit a great ball in the corner. I tracked it down and then you hit a winner. My mentality was, I just used up 2 of your 20 shots and you only won 1 point on it. And by the way, if you could hit 50 awesome shots, you'd be a 5-0, but you're not. So I know you can't do it. And so there's no shame in losing a point because I hit the ball a little too slow and they cracked a winner. That is not a concern for me. So again, taking pace off, being more consistent, and then maybe floating that backhand line to get them to hit a forehand cross back to you.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of kind of like them having like a certain, finite amount of like winners that they can hit. And like, that goes as well, like players like Diego Schwartzman or whoever else, like also like the more fit you are and the more consistent you are, and you can get some of those, winners back. Like, it's very frustrating, and then it kind of depletes their good shot, repertoire, if you will. And yeah, so that definitely helps. Kind of random there, but yeah. Let's see. I've got a kind of a list of like different types of players that I'm wondering if you could maybe lay out like just some like general strategy for the audience, because obviously I picked like the ones that we play the most, including your type as well. But I guess we'll go with the maybe I'll use a nicer moniker, like the ultra consistent player who like never attacks the ball. They just get the ball back. Not really too much pace generally, although I guess it depends on the level, obviously. But how do you generally play these super consistent types of players?
Were you trying to avoid using the P word right there?
Yeah, I don't know why, because I've said it before, but for some reason.
Yeah, so super consistent player, right? So that's a challenge, right? Because we know the game is about errors, and if they're really consistent, that's an issue. And especially if your shots can't generate short balls, that's also an issue, because now it's very tough to attack this person. Yeah. Going back to your question about, are you focused on yourself or them? I think one of the questions you got to ask is, what style does this player not want to play? So their whole game is being consistent. Most of the time, they don't want to be the person attacking, right? They've won their whole life on you overplaying. So, the goal would be maybe on your first serve and maybe on your second serve, you can generate short balls and then you can come to the net and that's great. But if you don't have that opportunity, I would just switch my mindset and go, hey, I don't mind drop shotting them. I don't mind giving them short balls because now at least I have them playing with their second best game plan and I'm making them a little uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, if you are the same level as someone and they make more balls than you, you're in for a really tough day.
Yeah, 100%. So let me take a crack at the serve and volley, Eric. You can grade me here. So I guess against a serve and volleyer, make a lot of returns. Ideally, like low, you can chip low, things like that. Just make them hit as many volleys as possible, and then otherwise, like if you're serving, try to just hit a lot of deep. It's just kind of a standard strategy for against a lot of players, but hit a lot of deep balls and try to prevent them from coming to the net. Anything you would add or just edit or just throw away with that strategy?
So just like you said, as a serve and volleyer, I really struggled when I didn't get free points. So even if it was a high volley, I was like, man, I got to hit another volley winner. Like I said, I don't have 50 volley winners in me. So every time that guy made me hit a first volley, second volley, overhead, man, I had to hit 3 good shots just to win a point. That pressure builds over 2-3 sets. Definitely what I said earlier about figuring out their best serve and taking that away. And maybe the last thing, on pro tour, you see a lot of guys serve and volley when the opponent is standing way behind the baseline because they can get super tight to the net and get a high volley. So if you are capable of returning closer to the baseline, take it early. That way that serve and volleyer is hitting the ball from behind the service line. It's a defensive volley, and then maybe you kind of have the upper hand.
Yeah, I love that last one especially. Yeah, because I remember doing this more in doubles, to be honest. But against a server, serving and volleying, like every serve, like especially the second serve, like I'd move up, shorten my swing and like crack a forehand, and they'd be volleying like behind the service line. It was fantastic. Oh, actually, one question I forgot to ask you is you mentioned when we're trying to minimize our weaknesses, like say the backhand, you like hit it at a pace that you can hit it with. It was one of the tips. Do you actually see that on the Pro Tour? Because sometimes I feel like it looks like that, like say with who's it, Kyrgios or something or some others. Like it seems like they're not really going full speed on that they could be on their backhand in particular. So do you see that as well on the Pro Tour?
I think they use their backhands as a shield, and he's a pretty extreme example, but he does that as well. The thing I always, with the juniors at my club or whatever, when you see someone who's better than you play, when they take pace off the ball, it's still like, wow, what a great ball. But if you're at that level and you see it, you're like, he's not really hitting it that big. He's just kind of massaging it around. And so sometimes when you're watching a pro, yes, I do think they do this, especially on key points sometimes if they have something that's not feeling good. But since their taking pace off is still maybe 70 miles an hour, it's super impressive. But they probably could have hit it 80 and they chose to hit it 70. And when you do it, it's instead of hitting 45, you're hitting 35 and you think that's so pathetic. But there's someone beneath your level who looks at that and thinks you're hitting a great ball too. So I definitely think it happens, but it's almost like this illusion because they're so good at what they do that even their slow balls have quality.
Yeah. No, that's a great point there. Good insight. How about like the all court player? I mean, this one seems like pretty intimidating because like all court implies they can do like a lot of things pretty well. But any advice against the all court player?
Yeah, I mean, like this mysterious all court player who has no holes, like you're kind of screwed, right? But the other thing I would say is like you're always paying attention to them. Everybody has holes. So man, they come to the net well and they hit their ground strokes well. Okay, well, do they hit every single volley well? Because I know for me, I was a great volleyer, but I loved low volleys. I actually hated high volleys.
Wow, why was that?
My grip was pretty extreme, so it was a little bit open on both sides. I would have gone back and probably switched that a little bit. But so when I had a high ball, my strings were a little more open. And so it's ironic. Most people wouldn't think that, oh my God, I can't give Stokke a high volley. That was actually a high forehand volley was not what I wanted. Low backhand volley was like my jam. That was where I was great. And so if you say, well, this person's all court, I guarantee they still have things they like to do more than the other. And you just have to try to make them play with their second or third best game plan. But again, this, mysterious all court player, if you're exactly the same level and you have a couple holes and they don't have many, another tough day at the office for sure.
Yeah, definitely, Jonathan. I'm curious about you mentioned more open grip. So instead of like a true continental, was it like more towards like the eastern side, like the right side?
No, it's the other way. I'm not even sure what you call that, but it wasn't. It was more like to where I was almost more extreme on the backhand side of it.
Oh,
so I was rolled over the other way. So now when I take my racket back straight, my strings were actually open, and I had to work hard to close it, which was kind of awkward. Now that I've learned a little bit more as a coach and like I can goof around as when I'm volleying with the kids, I'm a little closer to an Eastern. I wouldn't say I'm a full Eastern on a forehand volley, but now I can flatten these things out. Now I don't mind it, but now I don't play. So it's only, 17 years too late that I solved that riddle. But yeah, I've moved it more over to the Eastern, and then the high forehand volley is a much easier shot.
Got it. Do you ever advise players? I feel like I might have heard some people do this, but do you ever have players like kind of like adjust their grip a little bit? Like I think I'm forgetting again who said this, but like they mentioned like on their backhand, they actually turn it a bit more so that they have like kind of a stronger grip for that. So, I mean, I don't know. Is that something that you like advise?
It's not something I teach. I think it's Vic Braden who was kind of saying if you have the Eastern forehand and then you can slide it over to your backhand volley grip, and you have the same amount of time, right? Like you do it when you're returning serve. So it's not different at the net. If it's something you haven't done before, that can be super tricky. But there are plenty of people who do it and they don't have a problem. I always thought it was easiest just to have my continental grip. I use it for the forehand, the backhand, the slice, the overhead. And it just, to me, was just a little bit of a simpler process. But there are people out there that do it and they do it really well. So I think it's just one of those things, if you can start it at an early age, there's no sweat, but I think you can be successful both ways.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, in terms of like mastering serves, let's talk about the slice versus the top spin, or, I guess kick for a slightly more advanced version, obviously. If there was like one of these serves that you would advise a player, like, I don't know, 3-5, 4-0 player, that they like concentrate more on mastering, like, is there one that you would pick for, as the top one, and why?
So, I think it was Carlos Gaffi who said you're only as good as your second serve. But I want to have a top spin serve that I can make 8.5 out of 10 times, that has enough juice on it where I'm not going to get attacked. And if I know I've got that in my back pocket, when I walked up to a first serve, I'm like, hey, here's a chance for a free point. I'm going to go for it. And if I don't, I've got this great second serve in my back pocket. There's no stress. I find people with weak second serves, it affects their first serve because now they're scared to hit it, right? They've got to make so many first serves to protect the second. So I think everyone out there, before you even kind of get going on the first, is have a second serve you're confident in that you feel like can't be attacked and that can show up under pressure. And then I would kind of move to the first serve.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember, prior guests, they had mentioned that they thought that, maybe the slice serve should be the one that the player should work on first, like, because it's like a little bit easier and whatnot. And I was a little surprised at the end. It made sense, obviously, but I was surprised at the end because in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, probably the top spinner kick, more net clearance, things like that. But I guess you can somewhat, fiddle around with the net clearance on the slice serve, obviously, as well. So, but yeah, I mean, both answers make sense to me.
Yeah, and I'd also like to think you can work on more than one serve at a time, right? So like, just because I'm prioritizing that top spin second serve, like I see what people say about, hey, if you get the toss out in front, slightly to the right, practice your slice. It's a high percentage first. I get that, and biomechanically, there's a great argument for that. But realistically, you're going to be practicing all the serves at the same time. But if you head out at a match and you don't have a second serve, you are in trouble. So you better make sure you have that one buttoned up nice and tight.
Yeah, definitely. So this next question, I was trying to like formulate it and I didn't do a really good job, but I'll try to now. So like, it seems like a lot of times, like, especially in like USA club level matches, you have like so many matches that, especially when they're like in like playoffs or whatever, like they always seem to go down to the third set tiebreaker, like every single time. I was just trying to, from your perspective, like why does that happen? Do you think it's because like, one side goes up, then they get nervous, and the other side like has a sense of urgency, and then they like try their best while the other person's nervous, and then they, get close, and then vice versa, and keeps happening? Like, I don't know. Like, does that make any sense? Like, you have any idea why that happens all the time?
Why you're saying why they always split sets?
Yeah, it just seems like it always happens.
I mean, I know I'm like the most logical, boring, rational person ever, but if you're playing someone your level, exactly. If you're playing someone your level, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, why should I win 2 sets in a row? Like that would be one answer, is like, hey, we're both pretty good. It's tough to win 2 consecutive sets against someone who's exactly the same level as you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, sure, people who are up get tight, and people who are down kind of relax and go, oh, this might be over, and they free up a little bit. I could see that happening. And then I think there could be some bias there. I think maybe sometimes you just don't pay attention to some of the blowouts because the close matches are so much more exciting that maybe that's not happening quite as much. But yeah, it could be for a variety of reasons. The second set letdown is like so common, where someone wins a first set and they celebrate and throw themselves a party. And it's like, you've done nothing. You've done nothing. Like, it's a race to 2 and you got 1 and you're acting like you're not even at like halftime yet. Like,
right.
What are we celebrating here? Just keep working, keep getting down to business.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, so it was really cool. Brad Gilbert, I fortunately had on the podcast a few episodes ago, but he was giving a talk at Junior Tennis Champion Center in Maryland, and some of you may remember me talking about this, but I forget who asked him, but they said like, oh, what advice would you give Francis, for next time, or what do you think he could have done differently, like when he lost to Alcaraz? And then Brad said, honestly, I feel like when he won that, was it the second set maybe? Or was it the third set? I forget. But whatever set it was. And his response was like, yeah, when he won that set, like he celebrated way too much, in my opinion. And he kind of like, you lose energy that way. And I remember in college, like having a teammate who was like, we were playing American, and like he was all pumped up, and like it was like the first game that he was like winning points, and he was like going nuts, and then he ended up losing like 1-1 or something like that. And I've experienced that myself too, like where I played a league match and it was in the tie break. Like we won a big point at like 6-all to go up by 1 point, and I was like, let out a big yell, and then ended up losing like the next 4 points. So, I mean, I just, some examples to kind of emphasize that tip that you gave in terms of like just not giving a release too early. Cause I feel like for a lot of people, you like kind of just lose focus and energy. So
I think there's a difference between getting excited and like literally relaxing and feeling like you've accomplished something. So if you win a huge point and you give a loud come on, that gives you a little energy, that maybe gets your opponent down, intimidates them a little bit. As long as you don't feel like you've already won the match, that's great. And then, like you said, you have to be aware after some loud come-ons, there's probably naturally a little energy drop. So if you got all excited after a break point, let's say you broke him at 4-all, 30-40, and you let a loud come on. I'm going to go up, and on the first point that I win on my next service game, I'm going to give myself a second one to make sure that I'm maintaining that. And not all points are created equal. So if there's a little energy drop when you're down 40-love on their serve, that's not the end of the world. But I think the biggest thing is feeling like you really accomplished something. Like, I don't know any NBA team that goes in at halftime up 50-45. Is like, hey guys, amazing. Like, we're going to win this game for sure. Like, that's essentially like winning the first set. It's really not that big a deal.
Yeah. And that's the second set drop that you mentioned. Any tips to refocus? I know this can probably apply to singles and doubles, but yeah, like when you get nervous and whatnot, like any particular tips that you give your students to help them refocus?
It's just, I think, just on a mental loop, that 15, 25 seconds in between points, you're just telling yourself how you're going to start the point. Whether you're down, whether you're up, whether you're happy with how you're playing, it's, hey, first serve return. I'm going deep middle. I'm looking for a forehand, and I'm going to hit high to their backhand on the first chance I get. Okay, good. Now I'm in the present. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. It takes out all the time for me to think about how bad I'm playing or whatever else that's causing me to lose focus. I'm always planning my first 2 shots. And once you do that for a long time, I think you'll be stunned at how often you can correctly do those first 2 shots. It's exactly how you thought it would play out. I'm going to serve wide. You're going to catch the return late, and I'm going to hit a backhand volley cross court. I mean, that used to happen all the time when I would think it, and I'm looking for it, so I'm prepared. It gets me in the present. I play better. So definitely planning those first 2 shots.
Love that. Yeah, I try to do that, but I admittedly don't. I forget sometimes. So that's something I'm going to really try hard to do. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Any particular serve +1 patterns that you really like your students to try out?
I mean, obviously, there's all the data out there that says serve +1 forehand is great. Again, I would say it kind of goes specifically to the player. I have some players whose forehand cross court to the deuce is amazing. So I don't care if they serve wide or tee in the deuce. I'm like, hey, let's rip that first forehand behind them and get them playing defense with their forehand, which some people don't do very well. Some people naturally have a better inside out, and they can maybe use that. I think always trying to get that serve +1 forehand is probably a great thing. And I know some people out there say their backhand is more solid, but most people's forehand is the bigger weapon and has the most potential to be a bigger weapon. So just sticking with that simple tactic.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. So yeah, we talked about return strategies. So yeah, wow. So in terms of like, what is like your top single strategy tip, like above everything? Like if it's like something where, all the listeners could just keep that in their head, like before and during their next singles match to use. No pressure.
No pressure. Geez. And this is so like, again, if I could go back and change the type of player I was, there's so many things I would have changed. But I think a big theme for me is I think a lot of people overplay. Oh, I have to get it so deep or they're going to hurt me, or I have to hit it faster. If people played within themselves more, whatever the tactic was, and were okay and got a little more comfortable with people hitting a few more winners against them, right? Just a few. Like no one's going to hit 50 winners against you to win the 2 sets. So within yourself more and be confident and comfortable with that, I think everybody would perform better. The problem is if someone out there listens to that and they go, oh, cool, that sounds like a great idea, I'm going to try that. And someone wins the first 2 games, they're going to go, it doesn't work. And I'd go, let's let that cook for 2 full sets and see if that person can keep it up. See if you don't develop a great rhythm by playing within yourself. And maybe you could even go for more later. But I would say whatever tactic you do, playing within yourself is a huge key.
Gotcha. And I know you kind of, by virtue of mentioning like the key tip, like you mentioned kind of reverse of that, what people, kind of a mistake, but I was going to ask you as well, like if maybe a couple of the biggest single strategy, like mistakes that players make as well, if there's any others that you have in mind.
Oh, I got you want a list of what loses matches?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hell, we could go to a part 2 here, but like, okay, missed returns, like I said, killer. Miss +1 balls, killer, right? Missing wide in the net. I mean, everyone knows that. Like you need to give yourself a ton of margin. There's not many shots that you hit so low over the net that impact your opponent. Use the height, be consistent. One thing I hate is when, let's say I'm playing you and you're in the deuce court. What's the highest percentage shot for you? You're hitting a forehand from the deuce. What's the highest percentage shot you can hit there?
Oh, cross court, forehand, topspin.
Exactly. Forehand, topspin, cross court. Now, if I let you hit that ball and you stretch me wide or even hit a winner, as a coach, I am pulling my hair out. I mean, if you're going to hurt me with a ball, you better be changing directions and going down the line and taking on some risk. So oftentimes I see people recover too far to the middle and I'm like, man, you just let them hit a winner on you and you let them do it with the easiest, smartest shot they could have tried. Like, let's try to find a way to let them stop doing that. What else loses? Missed passing shots. Throw up a lob. Make someone hit an overhead. I see so many terrible overheads every day. Make someone finish you. Definitely. A vast majority of those net points are won off missed passing shots. But like I said, I think I just nailed off 4. If you gave me some time, it'd be like 34. But there's a lot of things that you can maybe part two. Future episode. But there's a lot of things where I know it sounds kind of negative, but to win more matches, you can really just avoid losing so much. I do all the, so many players do all these things that lose matches. Let's just stop doing that before we even attempt to win the match. That will help people tremendously.
Yeah, I love those. Fantastic. Yeah, just plug the leaks one by one. You've really done a great job, Jonathan, with your Baseline Intelligence podcast. Saw some great guests come through. You got like basically a 5.0 rating on there, so really great guests. Is there, and you've had John Isner too at 6. So is there one is there one piece of advice from any of your guests as well that has stuck out to you? This doesn't have to necessarily be like single strategy related, but just something, recently or whenever from a guest that you found to be like a really good piece of advice. Maybe your listeners like said, hey, like this was really awesome, or you just liked it yourself.
That's a great question. So there's actually, I'm doing like whatever. When I learned this from you, but I'm doing like a year-end recap. So I've gone back and listened to all mine and try to figure out the things that I like the most. This one kind of ties in. We were talking about grips earlier, and this is just the thing that I thought was the coolest. But Michael Joyce, I can't remember, it was maybe episode 10, somewhere around there. Okay. And he was talking about how when Maria Sharapova was playing Henin in the finals of the US Open, she had never beat her. And his dad, who was very into tennis at the time, kind of said, hey, Henin's grip changes are so extreme that when you hit to her backhand, which was an amazing shot, the first time you hit there, she never goes after it because she's not quite comfortable with her grip. So he said, Maria should just go 1 to the forehand, 1 to the backhand, 1 to the forehand, 1 to the backhand. And that simple strategy, she beat her in straight sets in the US Open final. I think he said she beat her 5 straight times after that. And he said, literally the game plan was like, we're just going to go 1 forehand, 1 backhand. And we're just going to make her switch grips the whole match so she never gets comfortable. And like, I thought that was, number one, so cool that his dad is the one that kind of suggested it. But you're looking at all these things and they hit the ball so well. And you could go, man, what a simple strategy Sharapova had. And that kind of flipped the series. Before that, she couldn't beat her. After that, she couldn't lose to her. And all she did was alternate where she hit her ground strokes. That was just a super cool story for me to hear.
Yeah, that's really cool. Just the power of strategy, no technical changes need to be made. Just thinking for a bit and employing it with the tools you have. So love that. Definitely want everybody to check out the Baseline Intelligence podcast with Jonathan, and we'll have a link to that, obviously. Jonathan, any particular, website, social media, handles, anything like that you want to shout out for the listeners to check out? Because, in particular, you have a lot of really great, content on Instagram that I love to watch all the time. A lot of great tips with your students and stuff. But yeah, anything that you want to shout out?
Yeah. So like I said, I just do the podcast and that's been a blast for me, but the @Stokke Tennis is my Instagram. And I probably put out about like 2-3 videos a week. And honestly, it's probably going to turn a little more into tactical and talking type things. The first year or two was a little more technical. And I'm running out of good songs to put in the background. so I got to do a little more talking on there, but just the @Stokke Tennis and people DM me on there all the time asking for certain things they want to look into. And basically the Instagram is the place you can find me.
Awesome. Love that. And we'll link all that as well. I guess I'll still ask this question, which is a classic at the end of my episodes, which is, and you've given us a lot of awesome tips today, obviously, but what is one key tip that you can give our audience to help them improve their tennis games?
Wow. One tip for improvement.
Yeah, I'm sure they've heard 8 billion, but
I mean, this is more general, but I think the biggest thing is patience. I mean, if it was really that easy, if I could come out and give you some drills for a palm down serve, I don't think people realize how long of a project that is. And if it doesn't feel good after a day or a week, they go, this isn't working. And it's like, man, it takes 6 months to work. And, learning to hit to the right target, something as simple as that might actually take you 3-4 months to get the discipline necessary to do that point after point. I think people are so impatient. I know I am with like my golf game. That's kind of like always what I equate the 4 or 5 tennis mind of my golf game. And I'm like, man, I'm impatient too. And if you really want to get better at something, whether it's a tactic or a technique, you better be able to work hard, and you better be able to work hard for a long period of time before you can expect serious improvement.
Yeah, patience is key. You made me think randomly of Gary Vaynerchuk, where he's always like, patience.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
man, what a guy. But anyways, thank you so much, Jonathan, again, for coming on to the show. And I think we're definitely going to do that, 30 or whatever it is, mistakes part 2, whatever it is, episode in the near future. Always love talking to you and definitely learned a lot as usual. So really excited to implement what I learned today. And I hope that the audience does as well. And I guess now it's off to my board meeting. Otherwise, I would have chatted with you much longer, but we'll link up again for sure. So thanks a lot, Jonathan. All the best, and everybody definitely check out all the links that we have on the show notes page and check out Jonathan's stuff because he has a lot of great content out there that he's putting out, putting a lot of hard yards to put that out for you all. Thanks, Jonathan, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, man. Blast as always.
Thanks, for sure. All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Coach Jonathan Stokke. Jonathan, thanks again for coming on. And I'm sure we'll do our 50 singles mistakes or whatever episode we're planning to do in short order. So looking forward to having you on again. And if you enjoyed this episode and if you feel like you got some good value from it, then I would really highly appreciate it if you would leave a review for the Tennis Files podcast. And you can do that by going to tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts. Definitely would be great if you left a review on Apple Podcasts, as that's the biggest driver of the show. But if not, I definitely appreciate, a review on any platform that you use to listen. And also want to leave you with a quote, as I do at the end of every show. This one is by Richie Norton. And Richie said, "Every sunset is an opportunity to reset. Every sunrise begins with new eyes." Really love that quote. It's time for me to get ready and do a couple of prehab exercises for my calf and glutes. And then I'm going to go and have a nice singles/doubles practice. And I'm actually testing out a new racket. For me, the Wilson Blade version 8, 16x19 is probably what I'm going to test today. As many of you know, I'm in the midst of a racket demoing Bonanza. So I'll probably use that one, maybe the Piero 2023, and probably my own racket to just kind of compare again. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. I've got a huge episode for you coming up next week, which is going to be pretty much the top takeaways from the podcast in 2022. So I'm putting together a lot of work, actually pretty much done with it, to put that on for you so you can check out the best of this past year. All right, that's all for today. Have a great one, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is your host, Mir Banarantshad, signing out.